Welcome to Behind the Fiction, the book lovers podcast, where we deliver interviews, insights, and ideas to passionate book lovers who want to stay in the stories they love. I'm Alexa Larberg, and this is episode 21 for October 11th, 2019. Today's guests are Michael Anderle and Ell Leigh Clarke, and we are discussing the Moonlight Detective Agency Series. It's a mouthful, but you should give it a listen. It's really interesting. We chat with Ell and Michael about the development of their characters, kind of what their characters do and are like, why Ell decided to use a pen name for this series, and why she decided to venture into paranormal authorship. So, before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to both this channel and our podcast. You will get all the insider information and you don't want to miss it. Now, let's get to the show.
Isobella Crowley, welcome to Behind the Fiction. Which of you is Isobella Crowley?
The one that looks female.
It's this piece of me.
All right, so let's
just
zoom in on Isobella. There we go. AKA Ell Leigh Clarke. For fans of the Cortherian Gambit and longtime LMBPN readers, Isobella Crowley is a pseudonym for Ell Leigh Clarke and Michael Anderle.
No, just Ell Leigh.
Just Ell Leigh Clarke, and the stories, the series, maybe. You explain this, Michael, because there's a tagline that says created.
I like how he says Michael and not Ell. Right?
Created by Michael Anderle. So what does that mean?
So what's going on here is Ellie and I, Ell Leigh and Ellie for short, decided that we wanted to work on a new subject or a new product together, a new storyline, and so we went back and forth creating it. But actually, through Ellie's pen name, Isobella Crowley, because of urban fantasy, which I'll let her delve into, we chose to do this as an Isobella Crowley written book, and then helped created by Michael Anderle because I didn't write the words.
Okay, and why a pen name, Ell Leigh Clarke? Because you spent a lot of time developing a name for yourself as an author.
Yes, that was very deliberate and strategic.
Yes.
For those that can't see that are listening, Ellie's over here doing no with her head by saying yes with her voice.
Yeah, if you're just listening, you need the full experience on video. So the problem with Ell is that, well, you know,
Speak
for
yourself in the third person.
It's that a lot of, everything that I've written as Ell is under sci-fi. And so when I started writing urban fantasy, I kind of needed to separate that out, not least because of the Amazon algorithms and, you know, how they tag everything. And so actually I needed to speak to you about this, Stephen, because it looks like you keep tagging Ell on the uploads. And so it means that Ell's also tagged. So when you look at the Ell page, like author in Author Central, it means, maybe this is too much baseball to be telling people, but like it means that when you look at Ell stuff, my cunning plan and the reason that I created multiple identities all hinged on being able to have this Ell Leigh Clarke thing as sci-fi and Isobella Crowley as the paranormal, urban fantasy, magical kind of shit going on.
Okay, and to really get inside baseball here, what she's talking about is when you upload books to Kindle Direct Publishing or KDP, there's a place for author names. And what we've been setting these books up as written by Isobella Crowley and co-authored by Ell Leigh Clarke and Michael Anderle, which in some instances does good things, like gets it associated with Michael. And I thought the same with you, but you don't want that. So that's easily fixed.
Yeah, I'm glad we had this conversation.
Yes, I'm glad we had this conversation in public. Yes. This is the way we roll.
It would have been a Slack message had I thought to mention it.
Well, this is Behind the Fiction, and this is very, very behind the fiction.
Yeah. Or I was kind of like in the back of my mind, I think it was one of these things that I was storing up for like during one of the parties or something when we get to Vegas, so that I could kind of like throw it on Steve, well, you know, who was off kilter or whatever. So.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
You got a heads up
your
on it.
cunning plan.
No, so when I interrupted a Zoom conversation that Michael and Ell were having, and when I got here, they were talking about marketing, and they were throwing around some terms that I'm not going to share that had to do with marketing. And here we are, I'm not sure, 3 minutes into the podcast, and we have not mentioned the series. yet, which is the Moonlight Detective Agency series, the first book of which is Last Ditch Effort, second book Diamond in the Rough, and there's a third book coming out soon. So Elle, can you give us a little like background on the stories themselves? Who are we reading about when we read these stories?
Sure. But like just a little point to insert in front of that, which which kind of puts this into context a little bit, is that the stories are kind of an offshoot of the personalities involved. So it's not so much about the individual like stories or characters and stuff that we build rather than the characters. But let me tell you about the characters.
Okay.
So I'm going to let Michael talk a little bit about Taylor in a moment, because Taylor was mostly Michael's creation, and I kind of was dragged along kicking and screaming and going, no, you can't make her that evil. And I don't
She's
know
not
if he
evil.
I don't know if he was modeling her on someone in his life or from his childhood. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. But Taylor is a separate issue. Let me tell you about the other guy. That's what do we call him? David
Remington?
Remington,
Yeah.
who Remy for short.
So I like this. So you're responsible for the creation of the male character, and Michael is responsible for the creation of the female character. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's accurate.
I don't know if that's accurate.
Okay, go ahead.
So Remy is actually built on someone that's like, I know a bunch of us have a crush on him. You know the cartoon character Archer?
Yes.
You heard it right.
I do not have a crush on him, but go ahead.
What's wrong with you? Oh my god. So he's a douchebag, and like for the first few seasons, like you can have no empathy with him, and you're just like, okay, why am I watching this geezer kind of like mess around and pretend that he's a spy and he messes everything up, right? So but then gradually, like he endears himself to the characters around him and to the audience, and you actually start noticing like, oh my god, I've got a crush on this cartoon character, like what the hell. And like, I am not alone in this. I have had this conversation with multiple females, and so like that's why I feel comfortable sharing this, because otherwise it would have been
Okay, you've never shared this with me, and this has got to go into some of these other conversations we have, because this is too funny. I mean, if you really think about it, you and your friends are living a trope at the moment. You are exhibiting tropist behaviors.
Really? That's
I think
the
so.
thing, is it?
I think we've just coined a new phrase: tropist behaviors.
Tropism.
Tropism. Yes.
Tropism.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit worried because I have no idea what that means. But no. So there was that influence, and there was also the moonlighting influence. So Michael says, "Oh, did you ever see such and such a thing?" And I'm like, "No, I'm like not that old." And so anyway, I had to.
So
go
for
Thank you
people
for
who
aging
don't know
me.
this, Elle doesn't watch a lot of television, but she apparently does watch cartoons.
Yeah,
Okay.
cartoons are the
Well-
best, and the Good Place at the moment. Anything that's like not too heavy.
But she'll binge watch stuff on Netflix all the time. So I was actually talking about Moonlighting, the TV show from what 35 years
Which
ago.
is great.
40.
Well, that was a great show. Yes.
It was a great show, but she had never seen it. So I said, "Hey, would you consider?" And so what Elle will occasionally do is she'll get online and watch like snippets of the show versus actually
No, I
watching the show.
send you the snippets.
Oh, okay.
Well, okay. So yeah, you guilty on some parts, but for that I watched whole episodes, and there was just some that were just too funny. And so like Michael and I have this channel for shenanigans, and it's just like for silly stuff that's like, like when you're in the day-to-day kind of grind of like, we've got to get a book out kind of thing, like you don't want that stuff cluttering up a channel, so we got a separate channel for it. So I'd be doing my research, and I'd be like grabbing the YouTube link, and there's this one piece. So just to set it up, it's a detective agency, and there's the female who is Sybil Shepherd, and the guy who is the guy
Bruce Willis.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
So looking like incredibly young, and it's just like, oh wow.
Because he was.
Right. And then there's this bit where she walks into the office, and like they'd had some kind of round, I don't even remember what it was about, but he's blind drunk, and she opens her office door, and he's hanging like by his jacket off the back of the office door. What the heck is going on? And And then like eventually he manages to get himself off, and she's just like, not get himself off the hook.
Thank you.
Sugar. So he's off on the floor like normally, and he's still drunk, and he's explaining to her like this brilliant idea that he's had, and it was something to do with like he's offering to sleep with her for her benefit. And he used all of these arguments, and it was just, the whole setup was hilarious, and I'm like, we've got to use this. So that kind of went, we haven't used that actual thing, but we've taken the flavor of those characters and their interaction to kind of use for Remy and Taylor.
Okay, and the stories themselves, there's a paranormal component to these, right?
Oh, for sure. Yes. So Taylor's a scary vampire, and Remy isn't, but he's having to navigate. So he's fish out of water, trying to navigate this magical world that, and I don't want to say too much because there's actually like a lot of world stuff that you discover like by book 3 or 4. But he's been oblivious to this, as have most of the population, and the whole world is hanging in the balance by the time we get to book 3. But
And how about a little backstory on Remy? Because I found that just the open of the first book to be fascinating, and his like backstory.
you read it.
Well, I haven't read them both, but I read the first one. Yes.
Oh my God, I'm always fascinated. I'm also always fascinated when you dip into the author notes and you comment on the author notes. It's like, what's, so Steve does actually read these? Oh my God.
I always read the author notes.
Really?
Yes. I occasionally comment, but I always read them.
Oh my
I
goodness.
especially read the thing where you were talking about getting up at 5:30 in the morning. So I started sending you, like looking to see if you were online and sending you early morning messages, and I never get a reply.
Yeah, because I don't log on to Slack. And also, I'm deliberately hidden on Slack because I don't want people going, oh, you're here, let me just give you a load of work.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, that's what's going on.
Okay. So anyway, the backstory.
Michael should tell us about Taylor.
I should.
No, the backstory on Remy.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to do that? Because I'm doing all the talking.
I mean, do you want me to start to cue you up? Because I know with authors, it's sometimes you're on to the 4th, 5th, 6th book, and you can't remember the first book.
Right. No, that's kind.
So he's sort of a Manhattan socialite, and things aren't going well for him, to put it mildly.
No.
From a financial standpoint and personal standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's sort of the way the first book opens.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's down
Michael.
to his last $100,000 and he doesn't know what he's going to do. If I could find, I was going to look it up real quick, but I think the opening of the blurb for book 1 really, last ditch effort says that Rami is down to his last 100,000. He's in dire straits. And that's kind of it. He's part of a very rich family, but he's been boozing and drinking and drugging and all the other things that he could do in New York. Family's finally had enough. They cut him off, and now he's been selling off his companies in order to live. And he realizes he's only got $100,000 left. He's got to do something.
And
that's
this
when
one other company.
This one other company that he doesn't realize is run by a female vampire. And for myself, when Ell was talking about this, I didn't want Taylor to be kind of a hero vampire like I have in the Arthurian Gambit series. She's a hero, but she's not afraid to eat people if necessary. So she still has that.
If you can't see Ell now because you have to be talking to have your image show up, but Ell is covering her eyes.
Well, it's kind of brutal, like I do stories. I try and opt for the stories where they're going to be fun and like have a message, maybe, if it's not too highbrow. But like when you're talking about like this female vampire like about to eat this guy, and her jaw dislocates, and she like just takes his whole top of his body off, and blood splatters everywhere, I'm kind of like, oh, this is so gross. Do we really have to do this?
And I personally thought it needed to set the tone of who she was. She was going to have people obey or die. That was your 2 choices.
Yeah, so like Bethany Ann in a lot of ways.
No, she might do a few other things. But yeah. And then you have the situation where Remy, who's expected to, he has his own socialite background, his own stuff, and then he meets her, and she's totally willing to off him without any concerns whatsoever. Her only thought is like, my fingers might get dirty for digging the grave for your body or something, and he thinks it's funny at first until she's not laughing, and so it always keeps him out of sorts of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about setting these two characters up was we also had Remy be a recovering addict. And like, you know how those kind of stories tend to go. It's like, do we really want to go there? And I think that we've kept it out of it being about his addiction. So like he has this extra facet of understanding. So like when one of the fairies goes off and she gets kind of lost in her addiction of attention and all this kind of thing, he has real insight into what she's going through and how he can be supportive and all this kind of thing. But yeah, like from his party boy days, he had all of these dramas and addictions, and he decided to kind of go cold turkey and pull himself out of it. But then he also knows that world of drugs and stuff, and that comes in useful as a private detective.
And it actually kind of falls in as one of the tropes for normal, not non-paranormal detective fiction.
Yes, I hadn't realized that.
It totally does.
Yes.
So, Elle, why did you decide to take a walk on the paranormal side after writing all that sci-fi?
Because it's fun. I think well, I think there are certain things that you can explore in certain genres, and some things that you kind of have to keep out. So, like for science fiction, I feel that this is exploring. I know we do space opera, which is like the drama within space, right? But I think also it gives you the opportunity to explore, well, what are civilizations like, and how can we build a better civilization, or what are the downfalls of the civilizations that we already have, and then we can compare and contrast them. And I think that's the essence of the themes in sci-fi. And so I think for paranormal, okay, vampires and werewolves and stuff, I mean, it's just cool apart from anything. And I think if you've been following
And
any of my
Archer.
face, and Archer, right? But yeah, it was more, I mean, like, I think the paranormal was like the fun stuff, and like you get to write your own rules and use something magical. And because I really believe that there's magic in the world, it's just we have to be tuned in order to see it. But also there was this whole detective genre thing where it's like you kind of need to, and like when I first started writing, I didn't feel like I was equipped to deal with it, because you have to manage multiple clues and multiple facets, and how to reveal those things, and you've got to have a lot of reveals happening in short succession to keep people engaged. Otherwise, you're just kind of going through the motions, and people lose interest. And I think it took 40 odd books for me to go, actually, I think I could probably manage this, like by, if I'm careful plotting it out, and doing an extra stage of doing the clues and stuff. So for me, that was the bigger allure.
All right. So the series again is the Moonlight Detective Agency, Book 1, Last Ditch Effort. Book 2, Diamond in the Rough. The third book is coming out shortly.
And we do know what it's called.
We do. Go ahead.
Girl's Best Friend, I think. Is that right, Michael?
I believe it is. We do have a very somewhat diamond motif going here.
Yeah. And then book 4 is still in the works, and we would, that was the conversation that you walked in on, Steve, where we were trying to decide on the name for the fourth one.
And do you remember what it was by chance?
Well, we started with Flourish Under Pressure, or Reborn Under Pressure.
That's right, Reborn.
And
right,
I'm kind of advocating. And then we got off. Well, I'm advocating From the Ashes, but we kind of then got off track with like
issues.
Marketing.
There are always issues. Yeah, marketing.
Yeah, and you will see in the show notes for the podcast, you'll see the cover, and we will stick a cover image into the video that you'll be able to see here. The covers for these books are amazing.
They are so
They are very,
cool.
very
They're
cool, and they
beautiful.
really set the mood. It's like a great urban fantasy type mystery cover. It's really well done. Really tells the
Yeah.
story of what you can expect from the books. So pick them up and let us know what you think. Thanks, you guys, for being here.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us, Steve.